Welcome. We have some weird thing on the phone here. Hold on one second. It says a restricted phone. I don't know what that means. Okay, so how is everybody doing during these sad 9 days? I got asked a very interesting question the other day, which was, are we allowed to be joyful during these 9 days? And I'm going to talk about that in a minute as soon as I switch over to the regular settings. Okay, so welcome again. So the question was must we be depressed during these 9 days? Are we allowed to be joyful during this time? Because this is the time that we are mourning the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. Now, the truth is, it's an excellent question, because we know that Rebbe Nachman tells us we should always be joyous. We should always be joyful. However, he does say that we should set aside a certain amount of time every day to be brokenhearted before Hashem. What does this mean? It means that not that we're depressed or sad in a bitter, grieving, heavy sense, but that our hearts are broken because things aren't as they should be. So what are things as they should be? So many answers to that, but tonight we're going to focus on the Beis Hamikdash, the Holy Temple in Jerusalem, and what it really means. Okay, now everybody has differing levels of familiarity with what the Holy Temple was. I'm going to cover a drop in the bucket of what it was, and we're going to talk about what this means to us personally, based on the teachings of Rebbe Nachman of Breslov. So we know from Gracious, from the first line in the Torah, that it begins with the letter Beis, or Bet. And the letter Beis means bias. It's actually the same word. It means house. Okay? A house, okay, means a lot of things. But there's a comment that the base that opens up the Torah is referring to the Beis Hamikdash, the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. Okay. In other words, must be something really important. Okay, the Holy Temple must be something that has primacy. And the Torah calls our attention to it right away. So what we have to understand is that the Beis Hamikdash is many things. It's mainly a source of godly awareness and Hashem's presence, a dwelling for Hashem's presence here on earth. And that's what it was. It's not just a building, okay? One of the things we have to kind of train ourselves to think like is that whatever we hear in Torah is never a symbol, okay? A symbol means something that represents something else. The Beis Hamikdash, every single aspect of it may look like it's symbolic, but really what it is a physical manifestation of a spiritual reality, which is quite a bit more meaty than a symbol. Now, let's talk about the beginnings of the Beis Hamikdash. I'm going to quickly go through some of the history. So we know in the Midbar that the Jews were commanded in, I think, Parshas Teruma, to build a Mishkan for Hashem. And it says, and I do have notes, I'll have to find it. It says, they shall make for me, okay, a sanctuary, and I shall dwell within them. Okay, now we have to understand that the Mishkan, the sanctuary in the desert that Jews would carry around from place to place, was actually the precursor to the Beis Hamikdash, the Holy Temple in Jerusalem. Okay, so there's a connection there. What does these words mean? I shall dwell inside them. Okay, So it means that when we build and carry the Mishkan, the sanctuary, with us, okay, Hashem is going to dwell inside our hearts. Okay? Not saying just he'll dwell inside the Mishkan. He's going to dwell inside us. He's going to have a place in our hearts. Something about the sanctuary is going to enable us to connect to Hashem in a very profound way. Right. Now, the reason why we mourn so much, if you only think about it once a year, doesn't really have so much weight. You think about it for 3 weeks or 9 days or just on Tisha B'Av, and then that's it. But Breslovers think about it every single day. We mourn the Beis HaMikdash every single day in a prayer called Tikkun Chatzos, which is at the midnight prayer, the midnight lament. And we also say this prayer during this time of year at noon, halachic noon in the 3 weeks, okay? The truth is many Breslovers and many people don't necessarily get up for the midnight prayer. It's an ideal thing to do, okay? It's an ideal. But we're always conscious that in order for Hashem to dwell inside us, we have to have this consciousness of the Mishkan, of the sanctuary in the Holy Temple, which is why in Breslov we emphasize this, okay? It's very important, the Holy Temple. Okay, so what happens is that we carried this massive construction, this massive sanctuary around in the desert from place to place. And I just want to give you some of the dimensions that we read about. Okay, we read about this in the Torah. The dimensions are the Mishkan was 20 feet high, 24 feet wide, and 64 feet long. That's a massive construction. 20 feet high is, I mean, most of us have 9-foot ceilings, and those are nice size ceilings. So that's like 2 stories high. And we were schlepping it around, the Jews were schlepping it around in the desert, okay? Because Hashem commanded it. This was a necessary part of our ability to connect to him. It was kind of a computer, if you will, that was programmed to help us connect to him. We moved it around, and then when we came into the Holy Land, when we were given Eretz Yisrael, what happened was the Mishkan was moved around for a few hundred years. It spent 14 years in Gilgal, 360 years in Shiloh, and then 57 years in Gibeon and Nob, okay? So the Mishkan was doing its job. However, the Torah says that we had to have a permanent place for Hashem to dwell. We needed something permanent. And when we were qualified to get that permanent thing was very specific. What was that? In order to have a permanent sanctuary for Hashem, we have to have peace, shalom. Shalom is wholeness, and it's peace. It's peace not only with our enemies, okay, the people who want to kill us, God forbid, but it's peace within our own circles, with each other, and it's peace within ourselves. And this shalom is a clue to our personal relationship to the Beis HaMikdash. Okay? We have to have peace within in order that Hashem can dwell within us, as it said in Parshas Truth. Now, the time approached to build the Holy Temple, and David HaMelech, King David, was the natural person to build it, except, very sadly, he was a warrior. And he was not able to build the Holy Temple. I find this very sad personally. I find it very touching. because his hands were stained with blood. He was a warrior. And no matter how holy and peaceful he ultimately was. But what he did was he passed along the actual construction of the first temple in Jerusalem to his son, King Solomon. Okay, and he raised funds. He was the fundraiser. He was a producer, if you will. Took all the booty from the wars of the people who had attacked us. Okay, and then we got booty from these wars, and he consecrated it and gave it over to the building of the Holy Temple. And then Shlomo HaMelech, Solomon came, and he built the first temple. Okay. So I want to talk a little bit, just a touch, about the architecture of the temple and some of the things in it. Now, if you're interested in this topic, there's some wonderful books on it and some great websites. I find this totally fascinating. And so I'm, like a Beis HaMikdash nerd a little bit, and that I like to look at I like to learn about what was done there and all the chambers. It's just fascinating, okay? And there's a book by the Ramchal, Rabbi Moshe Chaim Luzzatto, Mishkan yearn, it's about the third temple, and it's actually been translated into English. That's number one. And then there's an organization called the Temple Institute, and they have a great website with a lot of pictures and video of what actually the Beis HaMikdash did look like, will look like, and so on and so forth. Okay, so I want to talk about some of the features, and I'm covering just one or two little things. I once attended a lecture on this, like a 2-hour lecture on this, and I think that, we touched on maybe 20 things, and he still wasn't done, the speaker. So, okay. So the first thing I want to speak about is the Mizbeach, the altar, okay? On the altar, we sacrificed animals, okay, korbanos were the sacrifices, to Hashem. And the smoke that went up, we are told it was pleasurable to Hashem. So what was going on there? To kill animals, not something that Jews don't kill animals for no reason, whatever. So we know there was an important reason. So when a person had to thank Hashem or had committed a sin or for other various reasons, it was a holiday, okay? We are required to sacrifice something. When an animal was sacrificed on the altar, it was like a person, okay? It was akin to a person sacrificing their own lives for the sin, for the thing that pulled them away from Hashem. And we know that death atones for everything. It was also like a sacrifice of our animal nature. We realized that we had done something that made us feel apart from Hashem, and therefore we sacrificed our animal nature on the Mizbeach, and we were ready to go. Okay. Every morning in your prayers, you'll see a section called Korbanos, the sacrifices, right? And there we go over some of the offerings. Offerings is a better word. We go over some of the offerings. Okay, we say this every day. We also say something else every day. We say the incense, the Ketores every day, at least 2 times a day, the Ketores. Okay, the Ketores shows how the incense, which was used in the Beis HaMikdash in various services, was created and ground up and so on and so forth. And we know every day that when we say the Ketores, we list all the individual ingredients. We also know that it's a penalty of death, if a person would mix those ingredients exactly in the same way today, unless it was done specifically at that time in the service of Hashem. When we say all these beautiful ingredients, there's one ingredient that stands out. It's in English galbanum, okay? And this is an ingredient that has a very funky odor. Why do we have something, a sweet-smelling offering up to Hashem that has a very funky odor? Because this teaches us few things. One is that every offering to Hashem, every service to Hashem, in order for it to truly be acceptable to Hashem, in order for it to smell sweet for Hashem, has to include the flaws, our flaws, the stinky parts of ourselves. With them, we can lift them up and serve Hashem too. Why? Because Hashem made us. He knows us. He loves us. And He knows our flaws. And He understands that we're flawed. And He wants us to look at our flaws, to look at the smelly parts, okay, which we all have, and to think about them, and to work on transforming them into a sweet-smelling incense that rises up to Hashem. Okay. It's just one aspect of the incense offering in the Holy Temple. Okay, so that chamber that had the incense also had the lechem panim, the showbreads. Okay, and in front of that chamber was something, the Golden Menorah, something we're all familiar with from Hanukkah. We know the story of the second Holy Temple, right? And Hanukkah and the dedication of, okay, Hanukkah means dedication, the rededication, when the oil miraculously lasted. Okay, that's why we light the Hanukkah menorah. But the menorah in the Holy Temple, the Golden Menorah, has 7 branches. Okay, only 7. And these 7 and one in the middle, 3, and one in the middle. Okay, 7. Why 7? So Rebbe Nachman tells us that the menorah is also an aspect of how we serve Hashem all year round, not just on Hanukkah. And he explains to us that it is akin to our heads. And when we sanctify the 7 candles of our heads, we are, in effect, sanctifying the holy temple inside us. What does that mean? Okay, so what are the 7 candles? So the 7 candles are the 2 eyes, the 2 ears, the 2 nostrils, and the mouth. How do we sanctify them? We use them in the most God-conscious way we can. This isn't an easy lesson, and it's not an instant thing we can do. It's something that requires a lot of thought, and it's something that we work on throughout our lives. So I'm going to go briefly over what I mean by sanctify. Okay, we have to remember that when the menorah was there, we were doing this all the time, consciously, subconsciously. Now we have to really think about it. Okay, so first our eyes. So with our eyes, we want to take in and look at things that are going to inspire us. We're not going to want to view or look at things that are going to lead us down a negative path. Okay, we can very obviously think of things like violent movies would be one. Okay, that's just the first thing that pops into the head. And, spending a lot of time looking at sites that aren't holy. Okay. The other thing is how we give out and sanctify our eyes. How do we do that? By looking kindly on people, by seeing the good in each other. That sanctifies our eyes as well. Our head becomes the menorah. How do we sanctify our ears? By listening to kind words, by putting ourselves in situations where we're listening to inspiring words, to kind words, to holy words. This is how we sanctify our ears. Okay? I'm not picking on rap music. picking on any kind of music. It's just the first thing that pops into my head for the vulgarity and the hatred of women and all these terrible things. You know, this would be the opposite of sanctifying our ears. Okay, listening to a nigun, listening to a Shabbos song would be sanctifying our ears. How do we sanctify our nostrils? So we're taught that the nose, okay, the breath is related to anger, and the nose is related to anger. Rebbe Nachman teaches us this. How can we remember it? When we're angry, we take a deep breath through our nostrils. We take a deep breath and we develop patience before we get angry, and patience before we react. That's one way to sanctify our nostrils. We have the mouth. Okay, that's the seventh candle of our menorah. How do we sanctify our mouth? Well, there's the obvious, is to speak holy words, to speak kind words, to not speak obscenities or angry words. Taking in, how do we take in? We eat kosher food. We make a blessing and we eat kosher food. It sanctifies our mouth. It makes us holy. These all make us holy, even if we don't understand the logical connection. Rebbe Nachman says that this invigorates our heart. It's a complex lesson. I'm not going to go into it here. But it stimulates our heart. It stimulates our positive and warm and loving heart. It stimulates our feelings of love for Hashem and for each other. We sanctify the whole menorah, and we end up with a better heart. Okay? So this was another aspect of the Beis HaMikdash. Then we have, okay, before I go on to another part, questions? Anybody, comments? Okay, I don't see anybody typing. Okay. Then we're going to go to the Kodesh Kodashim, the Holy of Holies. Okay, what was this part of the Holy Temple? So this is where the Ark of the Covenant was kept, with the two cherubim on top, okay? And inside were the two tablets with the 10 Commandments, as well as the original and first Torah scroll that Moshe wrote, dictated by Hashem. Can you imagine? Every Torah scroll is so precious. We take very good care of Torah scrolls, and we honor them and we protect them. Can you imagine the intrinsic value of this Torah scroll? This was at the heart, the Holy of Holies in the temple. Okay? And this is a clue to us. The Holy of Holies is the deepest part of the temple, and it's the deepest part of ourselves. Okay? That's where the Torah should be, deep inside, protected. And the access to it has to be access when we're ready for it in a pure way, but it still has to be within us all the time. Okay? So we can see just a little taste of the temple architecture, that it reflects us as people, and it shows us how to serve Hashem, and that each of the services done in the Beis HaMikdash are actually services that we are also doing simultaneously, spiritually and in our bodies. It's not just a building. It was never just a building. Okay? Now, when the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, okay, we learn that Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon, had built underneath tunnels, a real labyrinth, a deep network of tunnels under the temple. We know we've actually unearthed some of the tunnels today. You can even visit them. And we know that the Holy of Holies and other things in the Menorah are hidden under there. Okay? Not the menorah was the second temple, but we know that anything that was precious is hidden under there. That's why King Solomon built it. Okay, and the thing that we have to remember that the Ramchal tells us is that when the first temple was destroyed, okay, it was destroyed because of idol worship and immorality. What is idol worship? Idol worship is anything that we focus more attention on and more lust for than our love for God. Okay? It doesn't have to be literally an idol, although it was. It could be money, for example. We could have such a worship of money. We could have such a worship of status or something like this. Okay? So idol worship, we know, drove the first temple to be destroyed. But when it was destroyed, the Ramchal tells us that at that time, the third temple, that's the future temple, not the second one, but the one we're waiting for, was built in heaven. That's why his book's called Mishkan elyon, up there, up above. It was built in heaven. It was created and built in heaven. What does this mean? It means, like I said in the beginning, that for every physical reality, for every physical thing we do, there's a spiritual reality as well. So we are waiting to build the third temple, but it's already built up there. Okay. It even superseded the second temple. The second temple was built by Ezra a few hundred years after 70 years after the first one, it began to be built. Okay. So what we want to understand is what all this process was of the temple and what we're waiting for. So the second temple came along, and it was destroyed with what? With sinas chinam. Okay, what's that? Baseless hatred. Okay, so we're going to now look at the second temple. We discussed the first, and really all of them have these various parts. So the second temple, how could it be destroyed from baseless hatred? What was that? What is baseless hatred? So we are taught that baseless hatred is any hatred we have for each other at all. But wait, what if we're justified? What if somebody did something rotten to us? Come on, that's not baseless. Rebbe Nachman and other sages tell us it is baseless. We're not allowed to hate one another because we are all part of one whole. And when we dislike one another, hate one another, resent one another, where does that hatred lie? It lies in our heart. It taints our heart. That's what a grudge is. It's something that lies in our heart. It's heavy on our hearts. Okay, whoever has ever had a grudge in their lives knows that feeling. It's bitter. If we have that, it occludes us from connecting to Hashem. It's a wall between us and Hashem. That's what brought down the second temple, was the hatred that different varying groups and individuals, holy Jews, but had hatred for each other. They betrayed one another. Okay? So the third temple we're waiting for, but we also understand and we're taught that we have a part in building it. We are going to co-create it in a sense with Hashem. We know it's built up there. There's a spiritual blueprint or temple up there. And when we build it down here, it's going to become joined to the temple up there. Okay? We're mourning the fact that it isn't built yet. We're not only mourning the destruction, we're mourning that we haven't built it yet. So why don't we just grab some stones and a couple of hammers, okay, and some marble and some gold, and do some fundraising. Jews are very good at fundraising for any kind of charity. Why don't we go and build it? Why not? Okay, so we have to understand that just as King David was required to stand back from building the temple because he had blood on his hands. He was a warrior. And just as he was required anyway before he began to make sure there was shalom, peace between us, ourselves, and our enemies, the same thing today. We're not spiritually ready for it. If we were, okay, we'd be in the process of building it. So how do we build it? Does anybody know how we build it? Has anybody heard teachings on this before? No comments, no questions? I don't see any. I see somebody writing. Okay, good. Okay, somebody's typing. So while she's typing, I want to tell you that it's said that for every generation that doesn't, that the Beis HaMikdash isn't built in that generation, it's as if we've destroyed it. Okay. So Mary Ann says, by showing love and kindness. Okay. So, okay. So by showing love and kindness, by feeling love and kindness, by correcting ourselves, by sanctifying ourselves, by building, okay, by building the Beis HaMikdash in our hearts, by recognizing that we have work to do. We have work to do. Okay? So Lauren says we don't have to build it. Hashem builds it and comes down from Shemayim. That's one opinion. Okay? We're talking about the opinion that says the spiritual Beis HaMikdash is already built and there's physical work to be done too. Okay? We have to have a part in it too. We have to have that mitzvah, that pleasure of taking part in an activity where we all join together. Okay? Now, why do Breslovers think about, okay, why do Breslovers think about the Beis HaMikdash every day and learn it every day, as I said in the beginning, okay? Well, the truth is that it's throughout the davening anyway, every day. And number two, we have to learn, study, think about the Holy Temple, okay, in order that we prepare spiritually to build it through what? Getting excited about it and yearning about it. Because the truth is, I'm going to tell you the unvarnished truth. The average person, on most days, if you say to them, are you yearning for Mashiach? They're going to say, you know, Mashiach to come and we'll have the Beis HaMikdash and there'll be peace on it. They'll say, yeah, of course. But there's a disconnect. In their hearts, they're not really excited about this. Okay? This is the truth. Okay? I'm guilty of it myself. Why? Because it's not on my mind. I don't have the consciousness to be thinking about it 24/7. In order to gain that consciousness, to yearn for something as sweet as having a place where you personally can fulfill your spiritual potential and the whole world can fulfill its spiritual potential, and we can all understand that beautiful bliss that comes from receiving Hashem's love and loving Him and meditating and praying and so on and so forth. You have to understand how sweet it is. If you never had chocolate, okay, forever's a chocolate fan, substitute whatever you want for that. If you've never had it, if you've never had a dessert in your life, okay, and somebody says, here's a picture of chocolate cake. Doesn't it look good? Don't you want it? You could say, yeah, sure. But you have to have a taste of it to really appreciate it. How many of us have a taste of the Beis HaMikdash? Forget about every day. Once a month, once a year. How many of us think about it? How many of us actually daven out of the siddur and really think about what we're saying when we talk about the Beis HaMikdash? In the siddur, it's all over the siddur. Okay, as I mentioned before, Kabbalas and Ketores. Okay, we don't necessarily just want things that are good for us or that are enjoyable if we don't think about them. We have to create a consciousness. We know that the way to create this consciousness is multifold and includes a variety of activities. The first is to learn about it, to understand. That's why I gave you that website and that book at the beginning of the class, okay? Because if you learn about it and if you look at it, it becomes very compelling. And you begin to understand what we're missing here. We're not just having fractured relationships and a hard time with money and a hard time with, your kids, and then somebody's lonely, and then somebody has a bad book. That's the fix for all of this, is godly awareness for all of it. Okay, and we can begin the semblance of it now. We can begin the semblance of it now. So the first thing is to study and learn. Understand. Okay, so there's actually a midrash, which I didn't mention, on Yechezkel, which says, okay, that the more we study and learn, the more we create the consciousness throughout the world, not just in our own heads. Rebbe Nachman speaks about this phenomenon. He tells us that our thoughts create reality, not just for ourselves, but they can actually change the reality all around. What are thoughts? Thoughts are energy. Okay, we know that energy affects things. You plug in something and you have electrical energy, you can turn on a light. You look at the good in somebody else, okay, or you look at the good in yourself, okay, the highest point of yourself, and you turn on another light, another type of light, okay? So whatever we think about creates. We create this way. We know that Hashem thought about everything before he created it. He had a thought, he had an idea, okay, and then he spoke and created. When we think, and we learn, and we focus on something, we create. That's what all that stuff about positive attraction and all that really is. However, we are not trying to positively attract just whatever our selfish desires are. We want to positively attract something that's going to be really good for us and really good for everyone. Okay? Something that's going to bring healing to everyone. Which leads me to another point that's important that I want to mention, is that the Holy Temple is a place of prayer for all nations. Okay? We're not just in this, okay? The Jewish people are not just in it only for ourselves. Okay? There are nations out there. And many, many righteous people from the nations also yearn for the Holy Temple, for the third temple. Okay? Because they also can serve Hashem. Okay? And the temple was not only a beacon of light and a place where we came 3 times a year, right? That we were commanded on the Yom Tovim to come on the holidays to Jerusalem, right? To the Beis HaMikdash. But the nations also came, okay? And they also have a place that is dear to Hashem. And they also can worship Hashem and connect to Him. So it's not just this one little building in Jerusalem that's for us and God. It's for the whole world, because the whole world will be filled with God consciousness at that point in time. So, when we mourn, okay, when we mourn this period of time, the destruction, we're mourning something that we can't appreciate, just can't appreciate it unless we use our positive imagination to think about it. Okay? We have to understand. People say, oh, when Mashiach comes, it's the answer to all our problems. That's a very pat line, and it doesn't mean much, okay? Because when you start to think about your problems, you start to unravel them, okay? And you imagine this instant elixir, okay? It sounds like magic. And what we're talking about is love. We're talking about love. We're talking about the love between us and God and us and each other. Okay? And in order to get there, we do have to pay attention to what's lacking, but more important, pay attention to what will be. And this is why we mourn so deeply on Tisha B'Av. This is why it's so painful. Now, I began tonight talking about the question that I was asked about, must we be depressed? Can't we be joyful during this time? And the answer is, okay, and I spoke about being brokenhearted rather than bitterly, heavily depressed. But the answer is that if you and I really understood what's missing, which is having that total consciousness, connection, and spiritual uplift for every moment, okay? If we understood how sweet that was and what we really lost, if we understood that, we wouldn't even have any desire to be joyful at this time. It wouldn't be a question. But it's a good question, because the truth is we all do, on one level, have this question. We all do, like, well, oh, it's so heavy. Why do I have to feel downcast? Why do I have to feel brokenhearted? Because the answer lies in what the Beis Hamikdash can teach us by learning about it, just scratching the surface of it. Begin to understand how valuable it is, what a treasure it was for us and will be again. Have you ever had a relationship in the past, whatever kind of relationship, let's say a friendship, maybe a family relationship, those are pretty prickly sometimes, and in that relationship, there was a lot of hurt, a lot of harsh things were said, there was a lot of pain, and a lot of ache. And maybe the other person did something unforgivable, okay? Maybe. It happens. Maybe you did. Let's just say it's the other person. And then 5 years later, 10 years later, you run into that person, and none of those negative feelings are there. And you may not even remember exactly what the argument was about. It was like a dream. It's like, did I really suffer for all that time, those weeks, those months, whatever I suffered with that person? It just has no significance to me today. It may have had consequences, but it just doesn't have no charge from it. I don't have any feelings about it. It's a dream, and I can look at that person now, and I may even remember some good times we had. That's easier to remember. This is kind of like that loss, that heartache, that suffering that we had. And when the third Beis Hamikdash is built, Mashiach is here, and we're all together, what's going to happen is we're told that we'll see as if we were dreamers. We were just dreaming. This has all been a dream. However, why do we have to have this dream? Because if you look back at that old relationship, and you were smart, whatever that fight was with that person, whatever that tension was, you will have learned something from the discord and the heartache. You may have learned how to have a better relationship in the future. You may have learned how to value yourself so you didn't put yourself in that situation. You may have learned how to speak more kindly to someone else, okay? These heartaches, these breakdowns, all these things teach us. If we want to learn, they teach us. What we're doing here now, what we're doing here in Exile, is we're learning. We're learning the hard way, it's true, but we're learning, okay? We need to take advantage of that fact. We need to speed up our learning. We need to speed learn this emotional stuff and this psycho-spiritual stuff so that we can look at each other and we can get past all that stuff in an instant. We don't have to drag it out. And we can get past it and say, you have a soul and I have a soul. And we're really here for the sake of our souls. And I understand that if I want Hashem to dwell in me, in my heart, I have to recognize that you also really want that too. And that you too have that spiritual potential. And this healing of that, the heartache we have with each other, the heartache we just have with ourselves. Many of us, most of us, have something that we have to work on, just our own nonsense that we have to figure out, okay? That healing is part of building the third Beis Hamikdash. And it comes about paying attention to our prayers, to our meditations, to our relationship with God, with each other, and with ourselves. And if you look at all the beautiful parts of the Holy Temple, which we touched on just a few of them, you can see that this is mere architecture. It's a description of something very alive and something that we can find ourselves in. And really that's the key, is we should be able to find ourselves in the Holy Temple. You know, God willing that we will be able to, and that this Tisha B'Av, we still have time. It doesn't have to be a fast day. It just doesn't. Because we know in the future, Tisha B'Av is going to be a yontif. It's going to be a holiday. We should pray for that. We should yearn for that. Okay? All right. Any questions or comments, or if anybody wants any information about where to go, they missed the beginning, and I mentioned a few things that they could read and look at, just let me know. Okay. And also, I want to mention to everybody that we have a Shabbaton August 17th, 18th, and 19th in Morristown, New Jersey. We have a Sunday program that you could just attend, or you can attend the whole Shabbaton. Rabbi Rietti is going to be speaking. We have a wonderful functional medicine, health and wellness coach, Georgianne Garfinkel, who's very brilliant and wonderful. She's going to be speaking about Rebbe Nachman and eating. Rabbi Rietti is going to be speaking about aspects of emotional healing, as am I, as is Yossi Katz. And I really hope you join us, and you can contact me to find out more information. And I hope you have a meaningful and a really thoughtful and meaningful Tisha B'Av. And I look forward to seeing you next semester, which will hopefully be very soon. Okay, everybody. Have a very good night. Oh, somebody asked me to repeat the sources. Okay. So I recommended the Ramchal's book, Mishkan elixir, which has been translated into English. You can Google it. For information about the temple, I recommended that you go to the website of the Temple Institute. It's really amazing. They have all the details and pictures. It's absolutely gorgeous. And I'm not sending you away from Breslov, but Chabad.org has some really neat pictures of the Beis Hamikdash and descriptions of the architecture. And there's another book, actually, I want to recommend to you. It's called This Land is My Land, and it's by Rabbi Chaim Kramer. It's one of BRI's books. There's a little bit of information about the Beis Hamikdash, the Holy Temple, in there. I'm going to type the name. But there's a lot of information about Exile and the Holy Land, and it's like a spiritual history, and it's absolutely brilliant. And I encourage you to read it. I encourage everybody to read it. Okay? All right, everybody, have a very good night. Take care.